Ladies and gentlemen, Ro Khanna, among others, is very upset about what happened to Thomas Massie.
My good friend Thomas Massie lost tonight. I'm angered by the smears on his character. He lost because he had the guts to take on the Epstein class. He lost because he had the guts to stand up against the war in Iran.
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and that's the progressive congressman from California ruling the defeat of Thomas Massie in his primary and saying it's the result of his fight against the Epstein class, a very loaded term there. Others have been more explicit that this shows that the Jews are running the Republican Party and American politics more generally. Here's Tucker Carlson. Establishment media wants you to think Massie lost because he defied Trump. That's not what happened. His career is ending because he defied Israel, a foreign country that for some reason has the tightest of grips on our politics. Nick Fuentes, of course, agrees. Israel used their control over Trump and their Jewish money to destroy Massie because he went against their agenda. There's no denying that Trump's GOP is nothing more than a front for Israel, and it has to be destroyed for America First to prevail. And of course, the radical left agrees because these people meet and agree on so many issues. Hassan Piker sounds just like Fuentes. Massie's defeat proves that the Republican Party is a pro-Epstein, pro-Israel cult led by their cult leader, Epstein affiliate, servant of Israel, Donald Trump. Then we get this from Cenk Uygur. Now we all know we're occupied. Israel controls our government. Anyone tell you otherwise is an obvious liar. This is the time for patriots. We now get to fight for independence again, this time not with arms or violence. We need a real, aggressive political revolution. So, is the Republican Party controlled by Israel and the American government more generally? No, and let's walk through why. The most important factor in this race is that Donald Trump opposed Thomas Massie. If Donald Trump opposes you in Republican politics right now, you are very likely to see the end of your career. We see these political corpses scattered across the landscape. Indiana, almost all the Indiana state senators who oppose Trump on redistricting go down. Bill Cassidy, inoffensive Republican senator, I think a pretty impressive guy in the scheme of things, goes down in Louisiana because he voted for Trump's second impeachment, actually finished third in the Louisiana primary, a sitting Republican senator, and Thomas Massie loses as well, which shouldn't surprise us, right? Are the Jews responsible for all this? Did they take down the Indiana state senators? Did they take down Bill Cassidy? No, the most important factor is Donald Trump. And what of this notion is that because Massie crossed the so-called Epstein class, that's why Trump went after him. No, the chronology does not work that way. Massie has long been a maverick and a thorn in Trump's side, and Trump was going to target him for that no matter what he did on Epstein, which was clearly an aggravating factor, but Trump was already going after him. And we know this. We have it on public record. The Axios reporter Mark Caputo pointed this out on X. The chronology: 11 days before Massie voted against Trump's tax cut and immigration bill, the White House's political director, a guy named James Blair, said he was a marked man. Only after he was targeted did Massie spearhead the Epstein files fight. And here's a tweet, June 22nd, 2025, from Blair. I hope Thomas Massie is enjoying his last term in Congress. So Massie, by the way, voted against the One Big Beautiful Bill. And if you're a congressman and you vote against a president of your own party's biggest, really kind of only major domestic legislative agenda item, there might be negative political consequences to you for that. Now, some people will say, look, Massie had irked Trump before and survived other primaries. What was different this time? It must have been the Jewish money. Well, there are a couple things that were different. One is that he actually faced a credible primary opponent this time because Trump was so motivated to defeat him that he went out and found and pushed Ed Galrine into the race, a farmer, former Navy SEAL, not a major political presence. He's not a highly compelling political figure, but he's a standard pro-Trump Republican, and Massie couldn't defeat him. Now, what about Israel? Why were these pro-Israel groups so against Massie? Was it because he criticizes the Iran war or he doesn't like Bibi Netanyahu? No, it's because his opposition to Israel is bitterly irrational and conspiratorial. He boycotted Netanyahu's address to a joint session of Congress. He says AIPAC, the lobbying group, has a minder for each member of Congress. He opposes all aid to Israel, including for Iron Dome. He tweeted not too long ago, or retweeted a meme saying that Congress had turned its back on patriotism and embraced Zionism instead. It's very telling that a pro-Massey group ran an ad during the primary campaign depicting Paul Singer, a Jewish anti-Massey donor with a rainbow Star of David behind him. In effect, Massey and his supporters are arguing that you can be viciously anti-Israel, but then if pro-Israel groups come in and oppose you and try to defeat you in a small d Democratic race, that's terrible and shouldn't happen. What kind of standard is that? It's an obvious double standard, and one of the big takeaways from this primary is that if you want to survive in Republican politics at the moment, maybe this will change, don't catalyze a coalition against you that consists of Donald Trump and pro-Israel groups, because you're very likely going to lose. And it's very telling that Thomas Massey had been there for 7 terms and could not convince Republicans in his own district to send him back. Why did that happen? Well, because the voters in this district, Republican voters in this district, are very pro-Trump, and Massey wasn't anymore. And he also had developed these bizarre obsessions, which brings us back to the Epstein files and the so-called Epstein class. So libertarians are supposed to be pro rule of law and pro presumption of innocence. These are 2 of their best attributes, but Massey violated all of this in his push to release the Epstein files, and his conduct since then, first of all, is against all precedent, and there are good reasons not to release raw DOJ information to the public. Of course, that's what Massey does on a massive scale, embarrasses a lot of people who maybe they deserved embarrassing in some cosmic sense because they socialized with Epstein when they should have known what a bad guy he was, but they hadn't committed any crimes. And because there is no additional crimes revealed here, no one that obviously was guilty of child trafficking or abuse, Massey and Ro Khanna had to engage in this McCarthyite escapade of accusing innocent people of terrible crimes or saying that they should have been investigated when they either had nothing to do with Epstein, and this was based on their erroneous understanding of the facts, or had been investigated and cleared because the allegations against them were clearly fabricated. So this was disgusting, and he deserved to lose on this basis alone. But he was so obsessed with the Epstein files because at the end of the day, he's a conspiracy theorist. And it wasn't just the Epstein files. He engaged in this ridiculous Inspector Clouseau type act with the January 6th pipe bomb case, maintaining that it was some sort of deep state inside job, which was completely ridiculous and unfounded. So you get Massey kind of spinning off into the orbit of another planet, and that's just not where voters in his district were or are, right? It tells you everything you need to know that towards the end of the race, he gets an invitation to go on Dana Loesch's show, a show with a following among a lot of Republicans. There's a chance that Republicans voting in his primary might hear him or see him on there, and he might do himself some good. No, he rejects that. Obviously, a little scared to go on with Dana. But where does he go instead? He goes on the aforementioned Cenk Uygur's show. Do any Republicans like that show or watch that show or share anything in common with that guy? No, but Thomas Massey did at the end, and that's why he lost. By the way, when it comes to donors, obviously a huge amount of money was spent against Thomas Massey, but there's also a fair amount of money spent in his favor. And some of that, at least, came from pro-Islam donors, came from Democrats, donors who are otherwise supporting the squad. So if this had just been a referendum on donors, it wasn't, obviously. That's not how we run elections. But the average Republican in Massey's district is going to have more in common with the Republican donors who are opposed to him rather than this exotic collection of anti-Israel extremists and leftists who are supporting Massey. So again, very good thing that he's going to be gone. It's a sign that the center is holding in the Republican Party, rationality is holding in the Republican Party. But that is not so true on the Democratic side. Here's an next post from our aforementioned friend, Ro Khanna. Massey lost his primary, and Chris Rabb secured a big victory. The message is clear. If you take a stand against war, AIPAC, and the Epstein class, you have no place in the Trump coalition. But the future of the Democratic Party that is done with the establishment is yours to shape. Chris Rabb just won a Democratic congressional primary in the Philadelphia area. A thoroughgoing, unrelenting critic of Israel, opposes all arms to Israel, thinks the Nakba is an ongoing atrocity committed by Israel, shared via social media a post suggesting the Bondi Beach massacre in Australia might have been a false flag operation. He apologized for that and said a staffer was responsible, but no doubt where this guy is coming from. Supported, rallied with Hassan Piker, and there are more coming along the line. We had a Texas candidate, Democratic candidate, saying this the other day. This from a woman named Maureen Galladino. She's running for Congress in the 35th District of Texas, and she vowed via Instagram that when she gets to Congress, she'll write legislation so that all Zionism and support of Zionism is undoubtedly anti-Semitic. Since it's Zionists harming the Semites, she'll turn an ICE facility down there in Texas into a prison for American Zionists and former ICE officers for human trafficking. So it looks like Ro Khanna is right when he says there's not a home in the Republican Party for these types at the moment, but the Democratic Party is welcoming them with open arms. That says very good things about the Republican Party in my mind, and bad ones about the Democrats. Hey, by the way, do yourself a favor, comment, like, and subscribe. I guarantee you, you won't regret it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.